I am a poor wayfaring stranger, while traveling through this world of woe. Yet there's no sickness, toil, or danger in that bright world to which I go. I know dark clouds will gather round me. I know my way is rough and steep, but golden fields lie out before me, where God's redeemed shall ever sleep.
Hello and welcome to Tea Time Theology. My name is Ivy Swinsky.
My name is Taylor Wilkie.
And we have two people here today to talk with us about General Conventions. We have Olive Swinsky, who is a deputy, and we have the Reverend Dante Olive, who is also a deputy. Thank you both so much for being here today.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
So we're specifically here talking about the elections that are happening this year. So can we just start by explaining what is the presiding bishop and why do we elect them and who elects them?
Great question. So electing a presiding bishop in the scope of the Episcopal Church is actually a relatively new thing, and it starts more or less in the 1950s. Prior to that, the presiding bishop was the presiding officer of the House of Bishops, and they chose that person because they were the most senior bishop in the House of Bishops. And at that time, instead of sitting at table groups, and there are some bishops who remember these from some of their early days within the church, and they talk about they sat in order. So like closest to the front was the most senior, back of the room, most junior bishop. In the 1950s, the church goes through this movement, kind of the national church ideal, and tries to change itself to kind of have more influence in the wider world. And so we start electing a presiding bishop who has that much more public face, no longer just the presiding officer of the House of Bishops, but really the kind of vase. Yep, the vase of the Episcopal Church. The voice and face is what I'm trying to say of the Episcopal Church. And so it's a shift of, and we could talk about maybe another time, the pros and cons of that national church ideal shift and what we were thinking about ourselves and where we actually are. But that's how it shifts to becoming elected. The House of Bishops elects the presiding bishop. They elect their presiding officers, just as the House of Deputies elects their presiding officers. But for presiding bishop, the bishops elect, and then the House of Deputies affirms that election. I'm always curious about when things don't go as we think they will. So the canons of the Episcopal Church are actually remarkably silent on what happens if the House of Deputies rejects who the House of Bishops elects. So it's never happened, and we don't have a plan for if it does. So
This could be the year.
House of Deputies, don't get any ideas. Just, do your job.
Awesome. And since it became a more public-facing role, has there been any sort of movement or talks about making it a more widely elected position?
No, and I can't imagine the bishops are ever going to want to give that up. Because first and foremost, the presiding bishop is the presiding officer of the House of Bishops and has that role within there. So I can't imagine that ever changing. And I think if we would open it up more broadly, that will radically change the dynamics, and we may very well end up more in something that looks like a presidential election where you have people actively campaigning and things hopefully in a much more ethical, nuanced, caring way. But it's actually the people who are nominated for presiding bishop, they don't start election campaigns and seeking things out. And I think if we open it up more broadly, it's going to look more like our civic elections, which may not be in the best interest of the church.
And one thing that I noted, because for context, we're recording this about a month out from when General Convention is, and I am just so surprised by the lack of information that you can really find on anyone. They have a very nice, I'm not dissing these very cute videos that they all did, but they have these 3-minute videos where they answer one question, and then it sends you to their diocesan page. There's not even a bio that they wrote. There's nothing about what they think their vision of the church is. So I just think do you think part of it is rooted in the fact that the bishops all know each other so they don't need to do that as much, or do you think it's not a priority, or do you think it doesn't matter if us lay people know what's happening?
Well, so what I will say is that is partially intentional, in that there will be an opportunity for a meet and greet before convention, but also when it was broken who was going to be the slate, it said that there would not be any interviews that they would do outside of what the approved materials are. So that's why you're not coming across all of these articles with these individuals doing different interviews, because they're not supposed to. Right? And I do think that you bring up a good point, that the bishops do know each other more. They go to all of these different
they meet
retreats.
Quarterly, right?
Yeah.
About.
And because they sit at these round tables, they have deeper relationships than intentionally than maybe the common lay person would have.
And is it kind of like the Pope? Do you get a smoke signal at convention to find out if they passed
Unfortunately, no. It's really. Well, I remember when we.
They don't lock each other in a room, and no one's allowed to leave until
So
they
there's a
sign.
thurifer outside, and the color of the
Oh my
thurifer.
gosh, can I have that job?
I mean, they do go
I'll bring my
pray
own
together.
Thurible. So one of the things, and I can't remember, were you at General Convention when Michael Curry was? Okay. No. So I was a deputy at General Convention in 2015 when Michael Curry was elected as presiding bishop. I also had a really intimate connection with that process because I was a layperson at that point, but I was one of the lay people on the joint nominating committee for the election of the presiding bishop. And so it's been weird this time around of just not knowing a whole lot, having spent all of this time with the candidates last time. But we'll celebrate the Eucharist together in the morning. The bishops will all be vested in procession. So normally at worship at General Convention, bishops are in just regular clothes and they sit wherever. But on the day the presiding bishop is elected, the bishops are all in rochet and shamir. So the white puffy gown thing with the red long vest thing. That kind of looks I feel like something a Star Wars character might wear in different colors, but so it's kind of it's called office dress. It's their office dress. They wear that, they process, they kind of line the hall where worship will be. And then at the end of the liturgy, at the dismissal, they all process off and go to generally the cathedral, sometimes just a really large church, or place that will fit them. And they go for a time of prayer and discernment and to vote. And they stay there. It's executive session, so no one else is allowed in this space other than the members of the House of Bishops and the support staff that they need. But nobody else is allowed in. And they vote and they stay there until there is an election. Generally, it takes quite a while. Michael Curry is the first person to be elected on the first ballot.
Wow.
And then word comes to the president of the House of Deputies to say there's been an election. And then shortly thereafter, the person who has been elected is presented to the House of Deputies. And so they come in, whatever diocese that person is currently the bishop of, their deputies meet them, they process in, it's this big celebratory moment. When Michael Curry was elected, the then president of the House of Deputies, Gay Clark Jennings, was at one point saying okay, we don't have any news yet. We think we'll hear something soon, we're not sure, so let's break for lunch. And the House of Deputies was no, we're not leaving, we want to know who this is. And I remember somebody who was helping out with the Diocese of Rhode Island at that point, he's can I get you guys sandwiches? I'm yes, we're hungry. But the House refused to break until we heard, and then Michael Curry's elected, comes in, lots of fanfare, we vote, and then we went to lunch. So it's kind of this very weird, and it's weird in the House of Deputies because you guys going on business as usual while this is all happening, and then the announcement of who it is made, and the last two presiding bishops with Catherine Jefferts Schori and with Michael Curry, I was at both of those general conventions. There was this great shock as the names were announced. And so Catherine Jefferts Schori being the first woman, Michael Curry, I think, was the projected favorite, but like being the first black man to be elected. And so there was this like kind of shock, applause, excitement, and then, a little pony show.
Cool. I have one more question before we dive into like who are these people from the limited knowledge we have. But what are your hopes for this new presiding bishop? And I will start so that way you have time to think. But there was a survey that went out and I like filled out that survey, and I remember putting on it that what I really hope and value in this future presiding bishop, because there are certain things that I just like assume a bishop should have, like they should be like good on their theology and have like a prayer life and all that kind of stuff. But like what I really value is someone who is kind and thoughtful, because I feel like that is something that is like so important in a leader, in having that sort of like emotional intelligence. And it's something that is undervalued, but can make such a difference in what they're doing. So I'm wondering what you all are sort of like hoping for.
I haven't been an Episcopal long enough to be hopeful about anything. Not hopeful about anything. Like that sounds really sad. But like I don't know enough about what a bishop really does to be hopeful about. Like I really hope they come to work like every day. That's what I hope. Like I hope
Come to work, have good theology. Okay,
like be around. Maybe come on. Maybe you know what? I really hope the new bishop comes on the podcast.
Great. High hopes.
Yeah, I think with our current model, I want somebody who takes seriously the fact that they are the person that the world looks to as the voice for Episcopalians. So having somebody who is kind, is not afraid to talk about the actual Jesus movement and not just like the nice cutesy white guy with sheep, because that's not actually the real Jesus movement. So somebody who can actually like is not afraid to talk about our place of speaking out against injustices in Jesus's name, and also somebody that is smart enough to surround themselves with smarter people, because I think that we are at a very critical time. And I know we say that at every general convention. However, I think that it's very true this time, given the global landscape, that we need somebody who's not afraid to have people that will say no to them.
That's so important, is have people that will say no to you.
So that's all great. I think it's all really important what Olive just said. I also think it's important that they show up to work. I so fervently hope and pray that it is a given that they have like a prayer life and good theology. Though, I mean, just to say they have good theology, I imagine what I might say is good theology. Someone else would say, no, this is what good theology is. But, I think, they believe in Jesus, and are not afraid to talk about Jesus, should be like benchmarks of not just every bishop, but every person who is ordained in the church. And frankly, every baptized person should not be afraid to talk about Jesus. But I think particularly in this moment, the coming out of the COVID pandemic and really the intense moments of 2020 through 2022, what we saw in those 2 years in the church was a drastic upheaval and change. Most parishes, including the one I currently serve, have drastically changed since where they were in February of 2020. Numbers aren't the same, things are different, and a moment we saw coming down the horizon in the Episcopal Church we went into warp speed to get there quicker in terms of changing membership dynamics, sustainability, and frankly, the number of clergy we have. A couple years ago, the Episcopal Church put out a survey of ages of clergy. I think it focused on priests. It may have been priests and deacons, But basically, there was like 270 of us at that point under the age of, it was like 35 or 40. And like the vast majority were at retirement age. And one of the things we saw in the pandemic was what we've known as this clergy shortage, which we were talking about. I mean, I remember being in high school, going to a conference for young people interested in ordained ministry. And the bishop who was there kind of leading this said, yeah, we're headed to it. We've got this clergy shortage coming. We've been talking about this for a long time. The pandemic really brought it here because there are a lot of clergy who they could have kept serving for a while, but they hit, 30 years of ordained ministry, they could retire, and they're like, peace out, this is too much. And so we're now in a spot where we see this here in Rhode Island where, like this summer we'll have something like 12 congregations without stable clergy.
Yeah.
We have I can probably count on one hand the number of parishes right now, if there are incumbents left, the people who are there now left would be guaranteed to get another priest because of the shortage that we have. And so then more broadly, we're seeing dioceses in that same spot of dioceses really struggling financially of where they can be. Can they, there's some dioceses there's real questions about their future. And so dioceses are merging together, dioceses are reunifying. And so we are in a moment where we really have to think creatively and strategically about our structures and institutions because the church of the 1950s doesn't work anymore. And so many of our institutions and structures are predicated on that model. And if we're really being honest, it's a model that we think was true in the 1950s, but wasn't actually accurate in the 1950s. And so I think it's really important for where the presiding bishop is to be able to come and think creatively and lead us into that difference because, I will be 35 this fall. I think I am still the youngest ordained person in this diocese, although Drake Douglas and I think, are the same age, based off an article that I was reading about him in the Narragansett local paper after his diaconal ordination. And I am so tired of hearing, in this diocese and in the wider church, of, oh, well, that'll be your problem to deal with when we're all retired. We don't have that luxury. And this is not visual and you can't see the reaction on the table there, but this we don't have that luxury anymore. And we really need someone in that presiding bishop's role to speak about justice, to speak about Jesus, to speak about the importance of the cross of Christ and what that means for us. And we also need somebody who can say, okay, to everything there is a season. And this season has been good, but we're in a new season now, and now we need new structures. Because I don't want it to be where, 5-10 years from now, when the bulk of clergy who are currently ordained are retired, and now the rest of us are left, folks our age, we're all sitting around the table, right, are left with saying, okay, what do we do with these shattered pieces, and where do we go from here?
We're very close to being in charge, everybody.
I don't want it.
Yes.
we are at the age where we are about to be in charge of not just whatever we're doing, but our entire generation being in charge of the world.
That's wonderful and terrifying all at the same time.
I know I said I only had one other question, but you made me think of another one, which is, do you think that all lays with the presiding bishop? Do you think the presiding bishop has the power to create all that structural change you're talking about? Or, because I don't really understand the larger scope of how things are broken down, the different committees and stuff in the larger church. So do you think that they hold that power, or do you think that it's more important that this person is able to get everyone to buy into this future?
The latter. The presiding bishop doesn't have the power, the authority, the canonical standing to snap their fingers and magically everything's done. In the same way a diocesan bishop doesn't have that, in the same way, as much as there are moments I wish it were true, a rector doesn't have the authority to just snap their fingers and things happen. But I think what the presiding bishop does have in that role is they, along with others they serve with, can help set that vision, can help present those right questions, enter us into a time of prayer and discernment. And the power of a leader, when a presiding bishop, when a diocesan bishop, when a rector, when they kind of present a vision going forward and create that openness, it allows that space for others to come through and those conversations to happen. Where if the presiding bishop is just business as usual is great, or saying, let's just ignore any institutional stuff and let's just go do this, no one else is going to then have that space to say, okay, let's think about the institution. Because I don't think it should be a preach a gospel of liberation or let's think institutionally. Those things I think can actually go together and can help support and bolster one another.
Nice. Well, let's jump into who the nominees are. So the first one, and I'm just going by, I think it's alphabetical order is how they have it, is the Right Reverend J. Scott Barker. And they are from the Diocese of Nebraska. If you go on to the General Convention website, you can watch videos that all of them have done. So first, what do we know about them? Who are they? Do we know nothing about them from our extensive Googling research?
I know nothing more than a brief paragraph, biological description in one of the church magazines I subscribed to that came out after the initial slate of 4. Nice. So this is not anybody I know anything about.
Yeah, I just know that he likes the cross from his video.
Yes, right. Which I think is important.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
that's a strong pro.
Yeah, but who doesn't like the cross?
I mean,
that
there are. Yeah, I was going to say we could have a fascinating conversation. Get like 6 clergy from our diocese here to talk about like Good Friday and Easter Day, and it would be fascinating what might be revealed in that.
Mm-hmm. No, it does seem though that he has been involved in a lot of boards. I think most interesting, he's a board member of the River City Mixed Chorus, which is Nebraska's largest LGBTQ plus choir.
Cool.
It's just like a very specific fact.
And so forget you have to get like the Providence Gay Men's Chorus, things like that.
Yeah.
The Episcopal Queer Chorus coming to a national church near you.
How fun.
I mean, we could pack a stadium with that, I
Right?
bet.
Think about the different parts, though.
We'll just do the amp. We'll rent the amp.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, it was funny. One of the things I'm like, oh, that's fun. He and I went to the same cemetery. Cemetery. Yep, we went to the same cemetery.
Nice.
We went to the same seminary is really what I meant to say. I've been doing too many funerals, so I guess I have cemeteries on the mind. We were obviously not there at the same time, and, that means as much as, nothing. But it was just like, oh, cool. We went to the same seminary. That's fun.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the next person. And he does seem like he's very nice. And I think it is interesting because I went to the bio on his page. And it talks that he is very focused on sort of evangelism and personal patterns of discipleship that help nurture a deep life in Christ, which I just think is a very interesting way to think about that you have to have patterns and recurring things, that it can't just be one-time things. Okay, so the next person is the Right Reverend Daniel Gutierrez, and they are from the Diocese of Pennsylvania. I will say I really enjoyed his video where he didn't start in any preamble. He's like, it just has to be this, where he talks about the woman in the well in his video, which I thought was an interesting one to choose.
What is that?
So the woman in the, I don't know why I'm answering it. We have someone who went to theology school here, but
you've been in church your whole life. You know the story.
So the woman in the well is the Jesus is going around, and at the height of the day, this woman is at the well, which is when people would go and get water. And usually it's not sort of at noon. You usually do it in the morning or in the evening. And she's not what is she?
So she's a Samaritan. And
yes.
This is important because they're kind of outcasts based on ethnicity. So this is a marginalized woman at the well getting water
by herself, which is also not done during the time.
Yeah, and so Jesus and his disciples are traveling around, and they say, hey, Jesus, don't go to Samaria, because Jews and Samaritans, they did not get along. And Jesus is like, I'm going to do what I want. Paraphrase of what he might have actually said. And part of, so, I mean, I've always said it. She's at the well in the middle of the day, which is not a time you want to go get water because, like, right, there's no, like, you don't get to press a button and then your bucket is just filled. Like, this is, like, hard work of getting water from this well and carrying these jugs back, to your homes. She is there in the middle of the day because she is an outsider within her own community. And part of that is because she's been divorced a few times. She's had a few different husbands. And so this is part of when Jesus knows all these things about her. It's this moment of Jesus knows her intimately, meets her where she is, and says, and really upsets yes, your community sees you as this outsider, but in Jesus, there are no outsiders. All people are welcome, most especially those on the margins, which was the big thing about what Bishop Gutierrez was saying. And then through her, she then goes back to her village and is like, y'all, guess what? Like, you won't believe what just happened. And she starts to spread the word with other Samaritans about who Jesus is. So that's the story of the woman at the well.
Yes.
See, teamwork makes the dream work. We'll all get there together.
Thank you for hopping in. We were floundering there. But I do appreciate his sort of, I think Olive and I, when we were listening to it, called it his catchphrase, which is, be you, do you, be different. And then it is a revolution of the heart, where a place where everyone can belong. So I do sort of appreciate the way he was thinking of that.
I think in listening to all the videos, that he did have that energetic speaking. It gave me the Curry vibe. So, in terms of like a talking piece for the church, would capture attention, I think.
And I think that comes into question again, Dante, what you were saying is like, what is the function of this person? Is it being that like charismatic front-facing person? Is that the most valuable thing? Or is it make sense to have someone who's maybe like a little, not that any of them are uncharismatic, but like someone who might not have that specific type of energy, but like theology is sound and has other gifts somewhere else.
Yeah, he definitely gives off I love that, the Curry vibe. And really kind of picking up and naming that idea of the Jesus movement of breaking those walls and barriers of being that. And I think one of the gifts that the Episcopal Church has is that we are a church that at its best is rooted in this idea of liberation theology, of following the example of Jesus, that there is room for everyone, most especially those who don't have another place to go. And that's such an important witness, both I think globally, nationally, but also locally. I mean, in the community I serve, we are the only progressive expression of Christianity. And so we are the only Christian church within our community where people can come regardless of all the factors of life and know that they're going to be welcome. And so I think that's a really important message to give out because sadly, it seems the dominant Christian message in our nation, and of course, I don't want to miss that Province 9 of the Episcopal Church is rooted in Latin America, which is a very different cultural context than here in the United States. But I don't know that content, so I can't kind of really speak to that. But here in the United States, 9 times out of 10, the voice you're going to hear about Christians in the world is a far more conservative, far more limiting voice of Christianity. It's a voice that says, you shouldn't do blah, blah, blah. You shouldn't be blah, blah, blah. And so I think the presiding bishop has the opportunity to be that, Bishop Curry would talk about the chief evangelism officer of the Episcopal Church, right? Be that voice and that public witness. And I mean, you do you, boo boo is, which is not exactly how he said it. Be you, do you, be different, whatever. But he also embodies it. I mean, right? Like he's in that video in a sport coat and like a black T-shirt, right? Like it's not even in clericals, and he has really kind of prided himself on a different model of being, which nothing wrong with a different model of being, and that can really help shake up a system and bring some newness and new vision. And he's also I'm pretty sure, at least of the 4 who were originally nominated. I don't remember the dates for Bishop Duncan Probe, but the newest, I think, ordained bishop of the 5 of them. I can't remember. She might be close. It's close with the 2. It's one of the 2 of them, but he is certainly on the younger side of his episcopacy.
I will say he does have a really good website for the diocese in general.
Yeah, technology is important, friends.
Yeah, so
Easily navigated is important. Great. So then we have the Right Reverend Sean Rowe. I really hope I'm saying all their names right. And they are from two dioceses, right? Because they are shared, and it's the Diocese of Northwestern Pennsylvania and the Diocese of Western New York. Which I do think it's interesting. He's the only bishop that sits on two dioceses, pretty much. I don't know how common that is, or if he's a lone wolf. Good for him, or not. No, there's two wolves.
It's a lone wolf pack.
Actually, well, fun fact, there are two wolves in the House of Bishops, Bishop Geraldine Wolf and Bishop Dean Wolf. Anyway.
well, just within Province 1, there is some bishop sharing going on right now.
Well, what's different about what's happening in Province 1
What is Province 1?
New England. So all the Episcopal churches in New England. So the Episcopal Church is
So we're
broken
number
up-
one?
We are number one.
We're number one. We're number
The
one.
Episcopal Church is broken into 9 provinces that are rooted on geographical areas throughout. So Province 9 is Latin America. Province 2 is like New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Also includes the Convocation of Churches in Europe. So fun fact, like the American Cathedral in Paris, the Episcopal Church in Florence, Italy.
And Haiti.
Like, so it's a kind of, and then the others are kind of geographical. So New England, Province 1. So Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, they all have elected their diocesan bishops. And then the canons of the Episcopal Church allow diocesan bishops to appoint assisting bishops. And so the Bishop of Vermont has made the bishops of New Hampshire and Maine assisting bishops in Vermont, and vice versa. So they've all basically made each other assisting bishops in their diocese to work together. I think recognizing, we should start being a bit more collaborative, recognizing the limitations we have in our own area. But I think he is the only one who is actually like kind of the main bishop of multiple dioceses.
So did the dioceses merge? Did they vote on? I don't understand.
So he was
what's
elected the
happening.
Bishop of Pennsylvania in 2007 at the age of 32.
Can you even do that?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can do that. He did it. He's the youngest person ever elected to the House of Bishops, and to me, it is like he was like 3 years younger than I am now when he was, and that is like a terrifying. He was also ordained a little bit younger than he was ordained for 7 years when that happened. So like that's a mind-boggling. Like to think about the amount of experience I have right now, because I've been ordained for just about to celebrate my 7th anniversary. Like that's how many years of ordained experience he had before becoming a bishop. Like mind-boggling. Sort of thing. So he's elected in Pennsylvania. And then in Western New York, later on, as they've had some transitions and things, he becomes the bishop there as kind of a pilot and a test to say, like, okay. And I think he was also then for a while provisional bishop of the Diocese of Bethlehem, one of the other dioceses in the state of Pennsylvania. And those sorts of things have happened when there's been, when things have not run as smoothly or as intentionally as one might hope in bishop transitions. So I got a provisional bishop in, so they still have that episcopal leadership. But so he's the only one kind of doing both right now, which is, I think, offers a really unique insight for where we are, particularly if we're going to get serious about how do we actually, to use one of my favorite mottos, how do we work smarter, not harder, in the life of the church? And we see similar things happening here in Province 1 of how do we work together.
I'm just thinking of how many committing meetings this man must have to sit on.
Pray for him.
Wow. Like the amount of
pray for all of
meetings
them, but yeah.
that man must sit on is wild. So he, in his sort of section, is talking about Luke's gospel. And I did really appreciate the like kind of sarcastic, snarky vibe that he brought to his video. And I say that with love because I appreciate that. Where he says that their vocation is missing the point as disciples. But I do think what's interesting about he said, which I think is almost exactly what you said, Dante, at the beginning of this, is that in the next 9 years, the Episcopal Church, we're going to have many opportunities to head in the wrong way. But it's also a chance to be freed from the past, from what we had hoped, and marshal our resources to meet the challenges of the future we could not have seen, but would not have believed. Which I think is just like, I think he's one of the only ones that really is like talking about like what the future he can kind of see is.
So I'll like make my confession to all of you. I did not get to watch 3 of the 5 videos, and his was one. So I only watched Bishop Barker and Bishop Gutierrez's, because then Taylor got here earlier than I expected him to this morning. So I wasn't just trying to steal from
Sorry
him.
for being,
Being
Punctual.
punctual
and like,
Gosh.
professional and
What
stuff.
kind of Episcopalian are you? And so, but I think one of the unique things that he has is, one, he is the longest serving bishop of all of the candidates. He is also the youngest by a decade. And so for others of these bishops, they are at an age where, they're going to hit mandatory retirement for priests and bishops in the Episcopal Church is 72, and that has to do with the pension system, which is a different conversation. And so the rest of them really will kind of be at that retirement point when they would finish their term, should they be elected. He's 49. I mean, he'll be in his mid-50s.
What do you do after you stop being presiding bishop?
That's a great question. It's like, what do you do after you? Well, I was gonna say after the president of the United States. Which president was it that then went to be a Supreme Court justice? Any? Okay, just me. Cool.
We don't know history.
Wasn't it John Quincy Adams?
No.
He went back
maybe?
to the Senate.
Yeah. Anyway.
We can cut this part.
I won't.
It's been a long time since I graduated my undergraduate degree in political science. But I think one of the perspectives that Bishop Rowe has that the others don't is that sense of he still has a lot of time left in his ordained ministry of active service. Where being 49, you're kind of these days that's like a mid-career point. It's like what he would do after this, I have no clue. But I think being on that younger side, it does offer a different perspective than somebody who is in their 60s. I'm not trying to malign anybody who's in their 60s. It's not saying that his perspective is better than the others. I don't want to get in trouble or anything, but it is a different perspective than somebody who is a decade plus older.
Well, I mean, this kind of speaks to a general problem we have. I mean, not to bring up the idea of politics, but I mean, this does feel like a political position. The people who are in charge generally are of advanced age, and the worry is that because they are of such an advanced age, they're going to make decisions that they then will not have to live with.
Right.
And that can be scary. So having a younger person that will have to not just finish out their term as bishop, but then have to continue serving within the church that they helped shepherd for a long time at the front is something very interesting to me. And I think, go back to the question of what would I look for in a presiding bishop? Youth. We need young people making decisions and thinking to the future, not thinking to the now.
Right. I mean, he's closer to age. I mean, I think about this, and just a friend of mine recently told me I was pushing 40, and I've kind of been freaking out about it ever since.
That's fair.
And so
I'm the oldest one here. I'm 35, guys. I'm going to be 36.
All right, so you're older than you're older than because I'll be 35 in September. And so, I think about Sean Rowe is closer in age to me than to my parents, where my parents are just a couple years older than the other candidates. So it's a very different dynamic. And then afterwards, Catherine Jefford-Schori, Michael Curry's predecessor, she's an assistant bishop in San Diego, maybe, or something. You go do bishopy things. I don't know, wear purple, carry a stick, wear a pointy hat. And
Get a dog.
Get a dog. Or a cat. And so, right, it's a very different perspective. And I think he's right. These next 9 years are, where we'll be in 2033, dear God. These next 10 years, I think, are really crucial for us of, are we going to pivot or are we not? Mm-hmm. And if we don't, then what's that going to look like? Mm-hmm. I call it job security because I'm young and there won't be a lot of clergy. And so I'm hey, I'll be able to get a job.
Oh my God, you're going to be at 6 parishes. Just drive around.
Well, and
are you going to pull, or they're going to start pulling a Catholic church and just you five, you're just going to go to this place now.
Well, and there are dioceses that are experimenting with. So in the same way where you've got Sean Rowe and multiple dioceses, there are dioceses that are experimenting of clergy teams. You have 2 or 3 clergy caring for 3 or 4 parishes, and how do you work that? I think one of the things that excites me about this moment is, yeah, there are scary things and lots of challenges, but there's also, I think, excitement in the unknown, the opportunity to try new things. You know, on a local level, it's like, okay, what's it going to look like to actually really invest in lay ministry, and not just lay people as like inhibited clergy, like, right? Like, you know, strictly speaking, it is not the function of the laity to administer the Eucharist and the liturgy on Sunday. Like, the prayer book says clergy do that, and the only reason we have lay people who are chalice bearers is because there are not enough clergy in parishes to make that happen. Like, that's part of the deal. And so there are unique charisms of the laity that come out of our baptismal covenants. And I think the church is going to get really serious about really encouraging that, because soon, I think certainly within my lifetime, it's going to be, okay, primarily sacramental teaching and pastoral care. All the other stuff say, okay, lay folks, rightly, this is going to you. So I'm going to do what I do. Let me encourage all of you. And I think the presiding bishop now really has that opportunity to say, okay, let's get back to those basics. What is the charism of the laity coming out of baptism? What is the charism of deacons coming out of their ordination vows, of priests out of theirs, out of bishops out of theirs? Because we look, they're all very different. How do we affirm people in their vocations where they are and allow folks to step up where they need to step up? And I think just continuing on as we've been, we're going to get 9 years from now and be like, okay, so now we got a real serious problem on what do we do, where we can actually try some really cool things, you know, within the next 9 years.
Anything else we want to say about our friend Sean? No? Okay.
So far, he's the best candidate I've heard of.
I don't know. I feel bad. We weren't in our groove with Mr. Barker. I feel bad.
Well, and I think
We can go back to
I would say
him.
one of the things with him that I've heard some people say that they're excited about is to have somebody from Nebraska. I mean, an area of the country that
Yeah.
doesn't get a whole lot, like,
I'd be
hasn't
really
gotten a
excited.
whole lot of hype.
Guys,
And
I've been
so-
to Nebraska. There's nothing in Nebraska.
I mean, there are
there's
cornfields.
things.
I did like his backdrop. That was
It was
just
a
like
lovely
field.
backdrop, yeah.
I was like, okay, way to bring that Midwest.
But right, I mean, that's a really important perspective and cultural identity that we have not really had in that position. I mean, Frank Griswold, so a couple presiding bishops ago, came from the Diocese of Chicago, I believe. Catherine Jefferchori, I believe, was from Nevada. And I think those are big things. She's also a pilot, so like she would fly to get around, because that diocese is the whole state. So she'd like fly around to the parishes for visitations. Like, that's pretty cool. You know, Michael Curry is in North Carolina, and so you know, it's a different demographic than we've had more recently.
It is interesting because 3 out of these 5 are like from the same area. We've got like Pennsylvania, West New York, and then
Central New York.
and then Central New York. Like,
And
they are all.
Let's be real, Atlanta is not that far away. I mean, so 4 of the 5 candidates are all Eastern Seaboard dioceses.
East Coast elitists.
Okay, let's not go too far.
Down.
While we're in Rhode Island. Okay.
Interesting. All right. But so I do think there's something, we didn't say this earlier, but I do think there's something kind of important there about, like, there are a lot of people who life in the major metropolitan areas is foreign to them.
Yeah.
And it seems that's where a lot of bishops often are coming out of. And life in those places is very different than in the Midwest. And so he's got, Bishop Barker's got a particularly unique perspective. Not only has he been bishop there, I mean, he's from there.
And I will say, because I was able to pull up the transcript, thank you for accessibility, General Convention website. And he is talking specifically about like the vision of carrying the cross being really compelling, and like what does that mean in relation to the baptismal covenant. And I do think it's interesting that I think he's like, is he the only one that talks about the baptismal covenant? I don't know.
I mean, of the 2 videos I watched, yes.
Great.
You guys watched videos?
This is a real podcast. We do research.
I mean, I did read the canons. Like, ready? Here's my dork fact for the day. I did read the canons and print out what like the presiding bishop canonically actually has to do as part of our conversation.
We all bring different
It's a
gifts.
one-pager.
That's it.
Yeah, the canons, the presiding bishop, there's stuff about their nomination process and things, but there's like,
Yeah, but the font's really small.
okay, it's size 12. Okay, Mr. Old guy here.
Yeah, it's too small. You get at least 14.
And it's Garamond, which is fun fact. Garamond is the closest font that comes standard on word processing things to match the font of the prayer book. And so like the bulletins here at St. Thomas are printed in Garamond, so it looks like the prayer book. This might be why I'm single. And so,
No, it's the font I use for my resume because I'm like, oh, it looks churchy and more formal.
it's easy to read. But yeah, so there's like 6 things that a presiding bishop...
Comic Sans, guys.
6...
It's the best.
There actually is a study, though, that if you write papers in Comic Sans, you can write them faster because the font is... No, I read it. That
We
there's
should
like-
probably cut this.
Anyway, no way. What would the font talk on Tea Time Theology?
Oh my gosh, I have this really great book. It's a book all about fonts. Anyway, sorry. Man, I'm a nerd. But yeah, so there's these few things that this is all it is. One pager of what they're supposed to do canonically. So it also means that there's a lot of room, and we've seen this over the last several presiding bishops, of there's a lot of room for that person to kind of put their own spin on it.
That's great. Then we have, which would have, if he became bishop, would be the most iconic name, which is the Right Reverend Robert Wright. I mean, like, you can't beat that, though. Like, if we were just going for, like, name power alone.
Right. The Most Reverend Robert J. I actually don't know if his middle initial is J. I might be making that up. The Most Reverend Robert Wright would be his... They dropped the right. It's not like the Most Right Reverend, like, you know.
Yeah, like, that would be such a great hashtag. Branding's important. So he in his thing, which I thought was interesting, because I think he's the only one who goes the Hebrew Bible for his specific one. I hope that Jeremiah is actually in the Hebrew Bible.
It
Great.
is.
I said that with such confidence.
You had a better Sunday school teacher than this when you were growing up. You should know this answer.
I know.
No, we just had choir.
Excuse me, I was her grade 13 teacher.
Yeah, that's why he said that, because it was him. But he talks about the potter and the clay, which I also thought was interesting in talking about how we are the clay and not the potter, which I thought was a very interesting way to think about it, that we, and then he also says, God hasn't forsaken us and the church isn't really dying. The church is being refashioned into forms that please God and do the word God wants us to do. And thirdly, God is right now extending an invitation for us to be remade as individuals and as a church into malleable clay, which is more than historic bricks could ever be.
And what
Mic drop.
Amen.
Yeah, and what I appreciate is that so often people are just so negative about the Episcopal Church right now in that it's dying. And I do think that it is important to have a leader who challenges that and does not say, oh, we're on death's doorstep, and actually is like, we're being refashioned and it's going to look different and it's going to be fine. And has that not Pollyanna positivity, but is more positive about
Well,
it.
hope. I think that we want someone who has hope in the future, because if you don't have hope in the future, why are you even trying to be presiding bishop?
Call it a day,
Right.
go home. Right, so I am aware, so let's talk about good theology for a moment. I am very much aware that, I mean, Sunday is like the coolest, this upcoming Sunday is like the coolest Sunday of the year because it's Trinity Sunday. But last Sunday, what surprises you of this?
Well, I was going to say, oh, you mean deacon preaching Sunday? But
I know, I'm one of those weird clergy of, I always get excited when I was an associate rector. The rector's like, you want to preach Trinity Sunday? Have at it. Like, I love preaching Trinity Sunday. But last Sunday was Pentecost, the end of the great 50 days of Eastertide, that glorious queen of seasons. Easter only happens because of Good Friday. And so I think there are ways where you talk about, we can talk about some numerical decline, which is, I think we can look at numbers and where we are and there's decline, but there's two very different ways of looking at this. There's a way of looking at it like, oh, we're dying and like, let's just like hang it up, like that very defeatist attitude. Or there's a way of looking at it that says, we are a tradition. We are a faith community that worships a God who dies on the cross and is raised again to new life on Easter. We only get resurrection by going through the cross. We only get to Easter by going through Good Friday. You cannot have rebirth without having a death first. And I think one of the things that I have seen of Bishop Wright is that understanding of kind of that recognizing of like, right, we are, as you read in that transcript, we are being refashioned. We are having a Good Friday moment. I mean, this is part of what has happened, we've seen countless times throughout the history of the church. Every 500 years, we go through a reformation, and it is terrifying for those who are in the midst of it, because it means what was will no longer be. Things are about to change, and change for many, particularly those in positions of power, is scary. But what we also know is there is resurrection. There is new life. I mean, that's kind of the thing for us. And you can't get to Easter, as glorious as Easter is, without going through Good Friday. Those things are intricately linked with one another. And so to see somebody writing about, talking about living that sense of like, right, we might be in that Good Friday moment, but Easter is coming, is so important. Because you're right, if we don't have hope, then like,
Well, it's
what
the
are we
same
doing?
And also, like, I think a lot of times the Episcopal Church gets like very twisted with the Episcopal Church because a lot of their like services feel very the same. Like if you were just a random person walking in off the street. I
I think you said the
You
Episcopal
said
Church.
Episcopal twice, yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking the Catholic Church.
The Roman Catholic Church
yes.
as opposed to the Universal Catholic Church, of which we're a part of?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
cool.
yes. We're there. But what I was going to say is that I think one of the things that is most interesting about our churches, I have not been in every Episcopal church, so I'm saying this with like a lot of confidence and painting with a wide brushstroke here, but that we have the resurrection cross in our churches. We do not have the crucifix cross. Like, I don't think of a lot of Episcopal churches that
Yes,
have
and...
that. What is the and?
Well, so there are a lot of places that have images of the crucified Jesus around them. Whether so we're recording this inside the church here at St. Thomas in Greenville. We've got the Stations of the Cross up around the church. There are several other churches that have Stations of the Cross. And we also have, we can't see it from where we're sitting, but we have resurrected Jesus fully vested kind of on the door over here. So like a lot of churches have a combination of those. And so like we also have a stained glass window of Jesus carrying the cross. So I think both of those images of the crucified Lord and the risen Lord come together in our spaces.
Yes.
Even more highlighting that link of those two. But there's also, I think, I can't think of many churches I've been in where there is not images of the resurrected Lord within the space.
Absolutely. I will also point out that Mr. Wright is on the Georgia Supreme Court appointee to a committee that reviews laws and policies facing the youth of the state of Georgia, which I think it's really, since we've been talking about sort of like that social justice of the Episcopal Church and like focusing on being sort of like that public facing person, to see someone who has some stake already in their community, that it's not just like you've been on a bunch of like Episcopal appointees, that you also, or like the Episcopal Church, you also are like an appointee in your community as well, I think is like a highlight for them as well.
And he has been, just like Bishop Curry, one of a really powerful voice around combating white supremacy, dismantling racism. The Diocese of Atlanta is doing some pretty interesting things around that. And think about wider service, he's also a veteran, a Navy veteran. And so I think the only of the candidates to have military service, which has a kind of trains you in a particular way to think about service and sacrifice.
Absolutely. Anything else about Mr. Wright?
And then we have the Right Reverend Dee Dee Duncan Probe. Okay. First, she was a part of the petition nomination period.
Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so every time, and we see this in dioceses too, so a nominating committee comes together and they put out a slate of candidates. And then, as I think a way of, at its heart, recognizing that the Spirit moves in a variety of ways, they open a petition process. And so they say, if you feel that someone else should be on this slate, here's a process to follow that. And so, the last time we elected a presiding bishop, no petition candidates were added. This time there was. And I read the letter she wrote to her diocese when it was announced that she was a petition candidate. She was part of the process, the original process with the nominating committee. And then obviously it was not on their final slate, but others still felt strongly that she should be there. And so, talk about being open to discernment. If you go through this process I mean, that I think takes a real lot of faith and trust and vulnerability of you go through this process. And having walked with candidates the last time around, I mean, it's a intense process, and the candidates, not only the ones who the nominating committee puts forward, but all the candidates they work with, they're really putting themselves out there and really kind of being vulnerable in that. So she walked through that process, has the experience of not, making the final cut, not being on that final slate, and I don't know what that emotion might be like, and then being open to that petition process is saying, okay, I will continue to put myself out there, which I think that's a very vulnerable, faith-filled thing.
And for the petition process, like, do you need a certain number of signatures? Do you just say, I think you're wrong and I should be on it? Like,
No, you need a certain number. Like there's like a process, and I don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but like you need some signatures and things like that. And so there is it's not just I can say, oh hey, I think I'm going to use our own bishop, because I think strictly speaking, he then we can debate, because I've done this with him. You can debate the canonical ability of this, but really. He would kind of really bump up to hitting mandatory retirement age if he would, so I'll use him, be like, oh, I can't just shoot a text to the nominating committee and say, hey, you should add Bishop Nyes to your list, love Dante. That's not quite how that works.
Who is this? What's going on?
I can't just say hey, I think you should put my bishop on the slate, right?
Yeah.
So there's actually a process of getting that person's consent, getting several other people to say, no, we think this person should be part of this process.
Awesome. So she also talked about the woman at the well. So I did think it was interesting that we had two people sort of using the same story, which I enjoyed because it's one of my favorites. And I think she brought up a lot of things that other people had said. We're seeking to discern God's next call for us, and I think God will show up in the least expected places. God will call us and meet us where we are, with invitation, with dignity, and with empowerment. So I do think we're sort of hearing the same things from her that we've been hearing from a couple people, which I think does sort of show that they were sort of looking for a certain type of point of view, because I think it is interesting that all four candidates have kind of the same point of view of what's happening. They've said it in different ways, but she does definitely have that. And she is, I'm sorry, I did not say where she is from. She is from the Episcopal Diocese of Central New York. Yeah.
Right, and I think you see a lot of similarities in these candidates, because the nominating committee, they do a survey of the church, kind of say, okay, Episcopal Church, and here's where the voice of people throughout the Episcopal Church can be expressed and heard. So they put a survey, it goes out widely, and it goes out in multiple languages, and asking a series of questions of, what's the priority for us in this moment? What do you think is the most important? What do you think the next presiding bishop should really focus on? And then the nominating committee, this is true, when I was on the nominating committee, I have no reason to doubt this is true for this nominating committee, they take that seriously, and in their prayer and discernment, they think, okay, here's what is being raised up out of the church. Here's what people from across the church are saying. So let's take that into serious consideration. Let's help that frame our discernment. So as we look at all the candidates who come in, we can think about, okay, so if here's the needs of the church right now, how does this person fit into that? And where are their gifts and skills lining up?
And I was able to pull up
The sort of data survey thing that they did. And the top 3 things for a presiding bishop for our time that had identified as important qualities were: number 1, strong leadership;
number 2 was a love for preaching and communicating;
and number 3 was faithfulness. So I think that I don't know any of these people personally, but I do think from what we have heard from them that you could confidently say all 3 of them do sort of fall within those guidelines.
Absolutely.
Is there anything else we want to talk about the nomination process for
Presiding bishop? Anything we haven't talked about? I think what is great is that even if people have a person that they've been more connected with or something like that, it doesn't seem like we have a bad candidate. All of them will have different gifts and talents to bring, but we're not dead in the water either.
Right. I think this is the 3rd presiding bishop election that I've paid attention to. And what has been true every time is they are good, faithful bishops. And they are people who care deeply about the church, they care deeply about the gospel. They have different ways of expressing that and living that out, but they are good, faithful followers of Jesus. And to your point of like at the beginning, right? Like that should be the given. Like that's where they are. And I think it's a really wonderful thing for the House of Bishops to entering into this election to be like, there are no bad choices. So it's really about just listening to who is the Spirit calling in this moment because they have the right gifts. The other thing I want to share is like, because I did bring it, so like these are the things that a presiding bishop canonically actually has to do. So they are charged with responsibility for leadership and initiating and developing the policy and strategy of the church, and for speaking for the church as to the policy, strategies, and programs authorized by General Convention. So like that public voice of here's what we say. They speak God's word to the church and to the world, representative of the church and its episcopate in its corporate capacity. Don't you love canonical language? They work when there's a vacancy in a bishop, they help work with that process. They consecrate bishops, gather from time to time, assemble, the bishops of the church, the House of Bishops, different councils. They preside over the House of Bishops, and they preside when there is a joint session of the two houses of General Convention. They are canonically to visit every diocese of this church for the purpose of holding pastoral consultations with the bishop or bishops thereof, and with their advice with the lay and clerical leaders of the jurisdiction, preaching the word and celebrating the Holy Eucharist. Sadly, because of the pandemic, Bishop Curry did not get to do that, including he did not come to Rhode Island, and I don't think he's planning on it. I think he was supposed to come, but pandemic happened, and and I also know he's also been sick, and so has missed out on a lot of things. So, and then the presiding bishop shall report annually to the church and may from time to time issue pastoral letters. And then they perform other duties as assigned, so other things that the canons say. But it's governance, it's leading the House of Bishops and kind of the governing bodies of the church. It is that pastoral voice, helping initiate vision, and the presiding bishop is not supposed to be this remote person. The presiding bishop is supposed to have those relationships, is supposed to travel on. So here's hoping, 5 candidates, when you make your trip to Rhode Island in your 9 years, let's go tea time theology.
Yes, we're very nice. I promise. We'll be kind to you.
Great. And we did want to touch on briefly that there is another election happening at this General Convention as well. And that is in the House of Deputies. So we've talked a lot about sort of the House of Bishops. Can you tell me what the House of Deputies are? What is this election? What are we doing here?
Yeah, so the House of Deputies is the other house because we have a bicameral system. And basically the House of Deputies is made up of clergy and lay leaders that each diocese has put forward to make decisions on behalf of them. Mm-hmm. The president of the House of Deputies is then the person who leads the business portion and also throughout the year follows up on all the things that General Convention has said we should be doing. Mm-hmm. And then they have a vice president to help them as well. Mm-hmm. This past election was the first time that it was a paid position. So before it was unpaid, but as this person is taking on a more public role between sessions, it is now paid. So President Harris, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, she was the first person to be paid to do this role. Mm-hmm. And typically it's 3 years for your time as president guaranteed because it's convention to convention. Because of COVID, it was only 2 years. And at every convention, there is the chance to have another election. Mm-hmm. Typically, it is not done, usually it's uncontested. Mm-hmm. If the current president says, yes, I'm going to, run again, you have up to 9 years. But unlike the presiding bishop, it's not a guaranteed 9 years. So that's why this seems like a bigger deal, because the last time it was contested, when I was, reading some articles, was 2003. So it's been, over 10 years since it's been contested again.
So I was reading that we didn't even have this position until like 1960, though.
Yeah, so it's right. So the president of the House of Deputies is the same way the presiding bishop is the presiding officer of the House of Bishops. The president of the House of Deputies is the presiding officer of the House of Deputies. They, chair the business sessions of convention. They appoint all of so there's all these legislative committees at General Convention. The president of the House of Deputies is the one who appoints all the deputies to those committees. And they also share in appointing priests, deacons, and laity to the standing committee. So all the committees that meet between general conventions that kind of carry out that work. And as I was saying, they're part of other various committees, and it is really a full-time job. And so the benefit of having this being a paid position is historically, more recently, the presidents of the House of Deputies have been folks who come from a particular socioeconomic background and place in life, so they largely have some financial stability and are older, so they have the ability to basically work for free for a full-time job. Being a paid position actually expands who really can serve in that role, because I never want this job, but I couldn't run for president of the House of Deputies if it wasn't a paid position. I'm I can't afford, I don't have a spouse, I don't have, funds, I don't have,
We got bills.
Seminary was real expensive, and the federal government wants its money back. And so it's really that open up that diversity. And it's been not more than 10 years, it's been more than 20 years. It's
oh my gosh,
it's a really big deal that this is a contested election and is quite out of the ordinary, because so in terms of terms, the presiding bishop serves for 9 years. It's 3 triennia. General Convention typically meets every 3 years. President of the House of Deputies has to be elected. They serve one 3-year term, but they're eligible to serve three terms, and typically that happens. So this is a very atypical situation.
And again, the shocking lack of information. We don't want to get too into the weeds on who these people are, or any of that, because unlike the people running for presiding bishop, we do not have videos of them, except for our friend Charles, who is running for vice president and launched a whole website. Thank you, sir. Or the Reverend Charles, sorry. So just to say who these people are that are running, it is the Reverend Rachel Tabor Hamilton, who is running for president.
And is the current vice president.
Excuse me. Then we have 2 lay people running. Julia Alea Harris is running again for her position. And then there is another person, Zena Link, who is from Western Mass, who is also running for president. And then our vice presidents, and if a lay person is elected president, then a clergy person has to be vice president, and vice versa. So for vice president, we have Reverend Charles Graves. Again, thank you for your website, sir. The Reverend Ruth Myers, and then the Reverend Steve Pankey. Yes.
And again, this is all speculation because we don't have facts. But I will say it is interesting that for the people running for vice president, they are all clergy. I just find that interesting.
Yeah, so last time, when we knew we were going to have an election, because we knew Gay Clark Jennings could not serve again, the other thing that I feel like this is true, but I could be making this up, so, grain of salt and all. I feel like
we're lovers, not experts.
We're what?
We're lovers, not experts.
Yeah. I feel like I probably should have read more I probably should have revisited the Standing Rules of Order for the House of Deputies before today, but oh well, live and learn. I feel like the people running also need to be deputies of the House, just like whoever's running, they're members of the House of Bishops. I feel that's true, because I feel like there was a controversy in one of my first general conventions, because the person who had been president could have served another, but they were not re-elected or something. They were not elected to be a deputy of the of from their diocese. So I feel like there's something like that, but I could be wrong. But so last time we had there is a much. Is that not true?
No, it is true. I remember reading in an article that any person who is a deputy is eligible to run for president.
Right. So this person
put
was
Olive's name on the floor.
Absolutely
done.
not.
Done and done. So the person was elected. They came to in the midst of their 3-year term as president of the House of Deputies.
Mm-hmm.
Their diocese didn't re-elect them, so they could not stand to run for their 3rd term. And so I'm glad I'm not totally making things up. So right, at least in this moment. So 2 years ago in 2022, we had a slate of clergy and laity running to be president of the House of Deputies. And then we elect the president first because, as Ivy said, whomever the vice president is, they have to be, they cannot be, you can't have 2 lay people or 2 clergy. You have to have a lay person and a clergy person in those 2 roles. Mm-hmm. And so you have this change. So it is interesting that the only people who have put themselves forward thus far for vice president are all clergy and not laity. Now, 2 of the 3 presidential candidates are laity, and so 2/3 chance of you're going to need a clergy person for VP, but and I think in my experience for president of the House of Deputies, unlike presiding bishop, it is more of a campaign type election. And so you'll see sometimes people have buttons or various things like supporting, endorsing particular candidates in the House of Deputies, where you don't see that in the House of Bishops. And so I know by name all of the presidential candidates. I actually know all of the vice presidential candidates, some of them more than others. But what I know to be true about all of them is all 6 of these people running are good, faithful leaders who love this church deeply. Mm-hmm. And I think part of why we're seeing some, a break in norm here and having a contested election so early on at all when the current person can still serve is a deep sense of we are in this critical moment and things are very hard and very difficult and people are doing their best to discern God's call for them. And so Rachel Tabor Hamilton, the Reverend Rachel Tabor Hamilton started this, the current sitting VP, I imagine and believe, has faithfully discerned she is feeling called to this. And so, and to say, and so I think there is something to that. And just because it's out of custom doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. But I think particularly when things are atypical like this, it's probably good, and I hope all of our fellow deputies will do this, not get into the speculation game of like, ooh, why, and oh, this person's done bad, and not to step into what becomes so characteristic of our secular elections, but to say, these are good, faithful people with long-standing service in the church, and they are doing their best to discern God's call to them. And we should take that same posture of this is about prayer and discernment and who is God calling in this moment to be the president and then vice president of the House of Deputies.
I'm just going to read what Harris's response was because I think it's actually really wonderful. Which is, this summer our deputies will continue discerning where the Holy Spirit is calling the church through democratic elections, including that of the president of the House of Deputies. I'm so proud to be part of a church where we have the power to shape our own future and to inspire generations of church leaders to come with our governance rooted in democracy, faith, and our listening to the Holy Spirit. And I think that's just like such a beautiful way to look at what we do every 3 years, because I think it's really cool that our church does hold elections and we believe in the democratic process and we believe in having sort of like that voice for everyone, which is not always how other churches are structured. And it really is sort of what makes the Episcopal Church so different from other ones.
Right. I mean, think about the House of Deputies. I mean, like, great, like this is cool. So, I'm a priest, I'm a rector of one of the parishes here in our diocese. Olive is a very active layperson in our diocese and in our province. And in other communities and structures, my voice would matter more than hers just by virtue of the fact that I'm ordained. At General Convention, our votes are of equal weight and merit. And so priests and deacons don't have more of a voice in the House of Deputies than lay people do. We have equal voice and vote, which is a very cool thing. And for the church moving forward on decisions like the decisions we make at General Convention, as Olive said, we're a bicameral legislature. You need the House of Bishops and the House of Deputies both have to agree, which means that the bishops can't act alone and the House of Deputies can't act alone. So we have to actually, and that's that real prayerful discernment. And by virtue of the two houses, they kind of have different energy, different patterns, which are good. House of Deputies tends to be the more immediate voice of, because, unlike bishops, there's no guarantee that you're going to go to another General Convention as a deputy. So there's that more immediate sense of now, whereas the bishops, there's that more permanency, that they have a more grounded rootedness. And so the House of Bishops tends to take that longer view perspective, and which is such this gift of coming together of which is unique to us. Well, there are other churches that have conventions and synods and things, but it's a particularly, unique thing to then say our votes matter just the same.
And also we are asked to vote in how the Spirit moves us, not necessarily how a person from Rhode Island should vote, a person from California or New Mexico or anywhere else. That you are elected by your own diocese, but that you are then asked to vote as the Spirit moves, not based off of X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, this big thing of we're deputies, not delegates, which sounds like a semantic difference, but one of the things they really talk about is no, as deputies, just as Olive said, the Diocese of Rhode Island has elected us, and multiple times. This is not your first convention, right? This is your second.
Correct.
And so has elected both of us multiple times to say, we trust you to be rooted and grounded in the Spirit, to use your best judgment, to vote and act kind of in that sense of, so it's not like we say, it's not like diocesan convention, we get together and say, okay, here are the things General Conventions is dealing with, we vote, and then we have to vote based on that. It's no, we bring our conscience, we discern, and then use our individual opinions to vote, which is a pretty cool thing.
Is there anything that we missed? Anything that you wanted to mention? Anything in total?
Just that there will also be a meet and greet as well for the candidates for the House of Deputies in person before convention starts. So hopefully we'll have more facts by then.
Hey, they have until June 24th to announce, which I thought was wild when I read that on the website. So there could be 5 more people. I hope not, for all of your sanity, but there could be.
Right. And so we'll
Tune in
have
for part 2.
right. Live breaking news from Louisville, Kentucky. And so, who knows what will happen when we get to Kentucky? Things, Spirit gets wild. We just had Pentecost. Spirit gets wild. And the Holy Spirit on that day of Pentecost did not come in gliding in gently like a cute little bird, Tweety bird coming in, the rush of a violent wind. And so, we pray for Pentecost moments of the church that the Spirit might break in, might disrupt our complacency, and who knows what will happen. But at convention, we will have a chance to hear from the nominees for Presiding Bishop, and there'll be opportunities to hear from the candidates for President of the House of Deputies, offering those who have that responsibility to vote for these positions, because we vote for them, but they have ministries that affect the whole church. And so we can have that space to hear and to discern who is God calling in this moment.
Great. Well, thank you both so much for being here today. And Dante, if we wanted to see or connect with you, how would one do that?
So you can find me here at St. Thomas Church in Greenville, Rhode Island, the corner of 44 and 116, 2 doors down from Newport Creamery, for those who need that to understand directions in Rhode Island. And you can also
That's not where something used to be, Dante. We can't.
Okay, we used to have a Benny's the other 2 doors the other way.
There you go.
There
Next
we
to
go.
the
We
old
have
Benny's, where the Benny's used to be.
We were kind of in between Newport Creamery and where Benny's used to be.
What
There
a
you go.
great place to be, though.
I mean, it's not horrible. We're also the closest parish to ECC. So for
fun.
the vast majority of the state, if you go out to ECC, you drive by our parish. But then you can also find me on social media. My handle on the Instagrams is at Father Ducky.
Awesome. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
I'm going there to see my father. I'm going there no more to roam. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home. I'm going there to see my Savior, to sing His praise forevermore. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home.
Thank you for listening to Tea Time Theology, a ministry of St. John's Cathedral in Rhode Island. We would like to thank our producers, Ivy Swinsky and Taylor Wilkie. Special thanks to Moa Conde and David Hines for our music. Our sponsors, the Episcopal Diocese of Rhode Island and the Right Reverend Nicholas Knisley, as well as our guests today. Follow us at Tea Time Theology on all social medias.